Look, Brad.
What?
Jesus wasn't born in 0.
What? No?
Or maybe he was.
Maybe
I don't know.
know.
Judeo-Christian, it's confusing to me.
We have no historians on this podcast. Let's just...
Look, we're all students of history in some way, shape, or form. But
I can read the internet, too.
Look, the Y2K bug, all I know is that the Y2K bug happened in 2000, not 1999. The start of the new millennium was 2000.
I couldn't care less about the logistics of calendars.
Yeah.
I care about the symbolic value of there being a 2 in the year now instead of a 1.
You know what really confuses me? Centuries. You know how people say like the 18th century, but they're talking about the 1900s? Yeah. I don't get that.
You just add 1.
But why do you add 1? It seems arbitrary. I guess the first century is the one from 0 to 100.
That's right.
Yeah, and then
there you go.
Oh God, I'm living in I'm a 20th century guy living in a 21st century world.
Now you're speaking the truth. So can we agree it's a new decade?
Yeah, the math checks out. I just did the math.
To be.
It checks out.
Okay.
The decade starts on January 1st, 2020. We have, let's see, 3 days left
in this decade. That's right. We're planting our flag here. It's about to be a new decade. Yep, Twitter contrarians need not apply.
We're making a complete list of everything good in the last decade right here. Movies, films, books, games. Or should we just talk about how tech has changed maybe?
That's probably... I'm not sure there was anything good from this decade, so maybe we should just stick with that.
Welcome to another episode of Brad and Will Make a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
Hey, Brad.
Hi.
It's the end of the decade.
It is.
I feel like we made it. 10 years of Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod.
Did we make it?
Can you believe we've been doing this for a whole decade now?
Yeah, let's just ring in the new decade.
Yeah, but I think it's important when you reach an arbitrary endpoint has no...
Yes, imagine symbolism.
Yeah, imagine symbolism, exactly.
Humans like to assign meaning where there otherwise is none.
Yeah, and
you may have noticed.
It's good to take those meanings and reflect on how things have actually changed in the preceding decennial.
It's a good time.
Is it a decennial?
Good time to sit back and reflect.
Hexadecennial?
Oh, I don't know.
Hexadecimillennial?
The metric system never really made it over here. I
can't. But no, for real. This has been a huge... The pace of technology's advance has been accelerating for the last 40 or 50 years.
You know what? I hadn't actually considered it that way until you just said it out loud, but absolutely. I feel like thinking back on, let's say, 1999 to 2009.
Yeah. We were originally going to do that for this episode. I think it got too broad immediately.
At first we were like, well, let's go back 10 years and then 20 years, but that's too much. But thinking about what changed between 99 and 09, it feels like a much smaller relative leap than 09 to now.
Well,
like a lot. So many standards have matured in terms of wireless and
things work.
Cellular data, and things have matured and kind of found their way into every aspect of everyday life, right?
Well, and the thing that's weird now, I said this almost a decade ago when we were starting Tested, but back then I could get a tablet or a really high-end phone that was about as capable as my 1999 PC was. Right? Now you can get anything. You get a toaster that's as capable as your 1999 PC.
I guess that's really what the difference is to me, is that at the end of the century, I was using a PC.
Yeah.
At the end of the decade following that, I was using a faster PC. And that's kind of the it.
Yeah. But now my phone is pretty much my main computer.
The proliferation of extra devices and extra ways to connect them hadn't happened yet. It was like you were just doing everything that you had been doing 10 years prior a little bit faster.
Well, and if you think about... So starting phones are the obvious place to start because that's the big thing, I think. That is the thing that has the most impact on people's lives in the last decade.
Yeah. It feels trite. We made this list before we came in here to do this, and you put phones right at the top, and I was like, oh man, it feels like we talk about phones all the time. But the phone kind of is the basis of modern society, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I immediately under phones, I wrote, we talk about phones a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it went from, in 2010, it was, in the 2000s, it was a luxury item. I remember buying an iPhone.
I guess you're right.
And I was like, I can check email without walking into the office in my apartment to go to the computer.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
Well, let's establish a little bit of context here.
Yeah.
So the first iPhone shipped in what, 07?
2007 in summer.
So by 2010, we're talking
iPhone 3GS is when that at the beginning of 2010. The iPhone 4 launched middle of 2010.
Okay,
I know this because this was the year we launched Tested, and the iPhone 4 was the first new iPhone we covered at Tested.
Okay, I feel like the 4 was kind of the beginning of the modern template for the smartphone. Obviously the touchscreen existed before that, and et cetera, et cetera. But the 4 is the one that prioritized pixel density on the screen, and I think it was the first one that had FaceTime. Did it have a Retina display? It didn't have a Retina display on the 4. Yeah,
it did?
The 4 was the one that they doubled the...
So yeah, it had a front-facing camera because it's the way they launched FaceTime.
Right.
And it was the first one that the rear-facing camera was actually pretty good on. Like it was, like if you go back in your photo catalog and you look at the pictures taken with an iPhone 4, like you're probably not going to print them and blow them up to 8x10, but you can make a pretty decent 4x6 out of all of them.
It was where the smartphone or the iPhone matured, I guess is the way I would put it. Like there had been iPhones before that, but that was the first one that felt kind of like feature complete. And to be fair, I never owned one, but
a 4?
No.
Oh wow.
I was in the woods on smartphones for a few years there. I think that was when you gave me that Windows Phone, and I limped along on that for a while.
That was a couple of years later, probably. But it was interesting because
I was on a 3G before that. Yeah,
but you could be in the woods on smartphones, right? Like at that point, like if you think about the number of things that you could do on your phone that were important for data, like I couldn't submit expenses on my phone then. We couldn't even post our CMSs. We couldn't update our CMS at Whiskey on a phone in 2010.
You mean because the browsers weren't capable?
Or the CMS hadn't been written. Like the frameworks that made the browsers.
Reactive design was not really a big thing.
No.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. So all of that stuff, like if you think about, remember Flash?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when the iPhone, like the early days of the iPhone, all the people were like, man, we got to have Flash on these phones. And Apple was like, no, fuck, Flash is terrible.
Nothing I loved more than Steve Jobs putting his foot down and just making everybody super mad by not supporting
that letter?
Various... Yeah. Is Flash the one he wrote the letter about?
He wrote the letter about Flash.
The same thing happened with like Blu-ray drives and
but usually
a couple other standards that they just decided to flush in the toilet.
So the difference though was that with Flash they came out and said, hey, here's why we're not supporting this.
It was like the
destroys battery life.
The rationale was sound because Flash was god awful.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like in that time the phone went from being a thing that I used to do email mostly, like because also email in 2010, if you remember, was terrible. Spam was out of control.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't rely on people getting your messages. I mean, that's still kind of the case, but like it was a bad time. It required a lot of work. And like now the default computer that you assume everybody has is a phone.
Yeah.
It went like, I remember standing on a BART platform in like 2008 and being surprised when 3 people had iPhones.
Sure.
And then like 2 years later, literally everybody has a phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. Sure.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm thinking about my usage habits because you say that's like everybody's main computer now.
Yeah.
Like there's still plenty of stuff that I won't do on a phone just because it's kind of inconvenient, but there's not as much that I can think of that you can't do on a phone anymore.
Yeah, it's usually like this is the best. Is this the best place to be doing this work? And
like if it involves a ton of typing, I'm going to go to it with a PC.
See, I'm fast enough with my thumbs now.
Really?
I'll even do a long, I'll bang out a long email.
I can't stand it. If it's more than a text message or two, I'm going to go find a keyboard.
You really are a graybeard.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess that covers phones pretty well. I'm just thinking back to like when the flip phone to smartphone transition happened, and that feels like the beginning of the decade. Kind of feels like when that became ubiquitous. Like obviously people had smartphones before that, but like
I think prior to 2010, it was kind of like the BlackBerry crowd had switched over to iPhones and Android.
Like the modern screen only form of the smartphone had only existed for 2-3 years at that point.
That seems right.
So yeah. And I went straight from a Motorola, or maybe it was I think it was a Motorola flip phone to an iPhone 3G.
I had the last dumb phone I had was either a Sony Ericsson candy bar phone or a Nokia candy bar phone.
Oh, mine was an LG. I'm sorry, but yeah, that was a phones were bad.
The other thing that the phones have had a bunch of kind of unintended side effects, I think. So like, I had a paper ticket for my flight at Thanksgiving for the first time in ages. Like I had to go print it out because Gina had bought the tickets for us and I didn't ever put the confirmation code in my thing. So, and when we travel with our daughter, then we have, we carry boarding passes because she doesn't have a phone, obviously. So it gets weird because every ticket I buy now is just a QR code on my phone.
Yeah. Like I bought some Christmas gifts from Best Buy for in-store pickup over over the holiday, and I just went in and showed them my phone.
I stopped at Starbucks on the way over here and bought breakfast, and I just showed my barcode to the machine, and they're like, "Okay, you're done, Gina."
Who wants to print things?
I use Gina's account.
Yes,
we consolidate stars.
Who wants to print things?
No,
these days, like that's just a waste of time and paper.
I heard printings for movie tickets, loyalty cards, all that stuff. It's all just dots on my screen.
Yeah,
now.
like that. That to me is the biggest upside. Setting aside like societal effects of smartphone
the privacy,
use.
the complete loss of privacy, the fact that everybody in the country knows exactly where we are. Every business can buy that information, know who you are, and where you are at any time.
The one real the feel good about kind of upside to me is the overall connectedness of and convenience of daily life now.
Yeah,
around things like that.
I think Verizon probably likes it too. They're probably fans because they're charging us $40 or $50 more a month for data now than they were back then.
Yeah, my phone bill is not as egregiously awful as I would have expected. Actually, I think it might be cheaper now than it was. This time a decade ago. I might be wrong about that. I've got an okay employee discount, but like their data plans,
Mr. Big Business.
I mean,
there.
It's like 10% or something.
But, that's like $1,000 a month.
I mean, I pay like $60 a month for 5 gig of data.
Are you both on the same plan?
No, this is just me.
Oh, that's just you. Yeah. So Gina and I pay like $120 a month, which
to be fair, almost everybody was paying subsidized phone plans back then. I feel like just about everybody was buying the 2-year subsidized phone. Back when
that just went away. Like that's the thing that disappeared in the last like 3 years.
So that's also part of the difference. But anyway,
so we carry phones. I mean, we all probably carried a phone before, but like for a long time, my dumb phone was a thing that I left off unless I needed it. Like I didn't use it. I didn't have it turned on all the time because I didn't text because texting was expensive.
I'm trying to think, like what my usage habits were. Like I remember text messaging people. Like it was, you were T9ing the text and that sucked, but like that did come in handy every once in a while.
I started text messaging. I got a text message plan when Twitter took off before there were smartphones, and it was just something that came in from 40404.
Oh wow, that's right. That is how Twitter started.
Twitter started as you texting 40404.
So how did you read your feed?
You got text messages.
What?
Yeah.
Every time somebody tweeted on your feed?
Look, people didn't tweet very much back then.
I mean, we'll get to social media, but like the evolution of Twitter is a big one for me.
It's banana. Like
not just Twitter, but every service.
We were too old for Facebook because it was for college kids. You might not have been.
Yeah, I mean, I was. Well. What is the Facebook era? Like 04 onwards, 05?
I thought it started in 07.
Well,
maybe it went public in 07.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between when it was like something college kids use and when it became ubiquitous.
I was definitely maximum PC when normal people started getting access to it.
Yeah.
So it would have been like 2005, 2006, 2007.
That sounds right. Late Bush era, let's say.
Yeah. Pre-Obama.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, and I think Facebook launched a little bit after Flickr 2004 is when it launched is when the events depicted in the social network happened.
Okay.
But it didn't open up for a few years.
God, tweeting by text is just insane.
Like I was at South by Southwest.
Horrible.
Well, it was great because like at South by Southwest 2007, which I was at, and it launched. I was on a panel with Ev Williams.
It being Twitter.
That's when Twitter like took off.
07?
So it had been out for a while.
Okay.
It had been out for like a year at that point, but it didn't really it took off at that South by because people were using it to tweet which parties had shorter lines.
Okay.
So like one person could tweet out, "Hey, there's no lines at blah blah blah," and then you would log in to the web page on my Windows mobile phone and see which like you could just search the overall feed because it was all South by people.
Right.
Like the everything on Twitter feed.
Huh.
Yeah. And you'd know that, like the Mozilla party, there's no line to get in right now. So you can go hang out and get free drinks. Yeah.
You were there.
I was there
at the beginning.
I was on a panel with Ev Williams. He was unassuming.
Huh.
And Dave and Ev Williams and I were on a panel.
How many founders do they have? A lot?
3. It's him and Bizstone and Jack.
And the other guy.
Yeah. The one that we don't talk about. Oh yeah. Anyway,
Twitter's weird. This is a major digression, but Twitter has always felt to me like the also ran of the major social networks in terms of like revenue and raw numbers.
That seems right.
Like all you ever hear about is how big Facebook is.
Facebook's making $50 billion in profit a year.
And I think this is much less true now, but for a lot of years, you kept hearing how Twitter couldn't really find a way to turn a profit very well.
I think they fixed.
I think they've somewhat fixed that. But the point I'm trying to make is like, from a business sense, Twitter has always felt like the third place one. But in terms of social cachet, it seems like the only one that actually matters. Like,
I think that's true.
Maybe that's an effect of my age bracket, but it seems like that's the only one anybody ever actually thinks and talks about.
Well, I think it's our job too.
Maybe
because I think journalists liked Twitter a lot, because it was always more personality focused than brand focused.
So does the president. You know, like Facebook is just for.
We don't have to talk about it. He uses Facebook too.
Facebook, well, like kind of, but
it's I think it's.
So Twitter seems to be the epicenter of where all the shit is going down. Like
Trump. They don't talk about Trump launching wars on Facebook.
Right.
It's always
that's what I'm
launching
getting
wars
at.
on
That's
Twitter.
Like Facebook is just for boomers passing memes around or whatever at this point. But like the action is on Twitter, and I don't know if that's. I'm not making a value judgment here. It's just it is what it is.
I think it's because they didn't ever algorithmically change the feed. I think it's because the feed is mostly. Linear, so it's like
for all their attempts to shove other things in there, it is still kind of just a feed.
Well, and so linear. As a result of that, that when he posts something, everybody can see more or less the same thing.
Right.
I don't know.
Sure.
It's a metaphysical question. I'm not ready to get into
far
right
outside
now.
the scope of this topic, of course. I was gonna mention real quick. I don't know if we're gonna move on from phones, but when you proposed this topic, one of the ways I wanted to think about it was kind of thinking back on what I carried around with me.
I love this. This is my favorite thing.
Like I love like what's in your backpack type videos and stuff like that. So like I was thinking like, all right, what are the devices we had on us in 2009, 2010?
What was it now? Hey Brad, what was in your bag 10 years ago?
Man.
Last decade?
So looking, I mean, in the phone context in particular, I had some variation of the kind of nice consumer Canon digital camera that everybody had.
Oh, like a pocket
like Elf.
Yeah. Oh,
was that one of the lines?
A digital Elf was one of them.
Yeah, something like that. Like the little,
a square thing with a lens that popped out.
Deck of cards shaped kind of little doohickey.
I had a Pentax Optio that fit into an Altoid tin.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like that, I assume that market is all but, I mean, that can't really exist at this point. I was going to say, I bet there are a bunch of like insignia brand cameras at Best Buy for people to pick up if they want them. But like everybody's either got a phone or they've got like some nice DSLR because they're a professional or prosumer type.
So there's two markets for that. There's the really cheap market that you give to like kids and teenagers and stuff like that, like party cams. There and old people. There's fixed lens cameras that have big zooms. So like if you think about the places that your phone really falls down, it's any kind of telephoto. Yeah. So Canon still makes those big wide chonker cameras that have the lens that sticks out a foot. And then the other place that they still have a pretty good market is like Sony and Fuji and Leica make fixed lens point and shoots that are just really high quality optics and high quality sensors. So like you can get a really, really good low light sensor in like an RX100 Mark 6 or 7 or whatever they're on now. And those are like $600 to $1,000 point and shoots.
Okay.
But they're for like portraiture.
Okay.
So like if you think about like Norm has one of those that he carries when he goes out and doesn't want to carry a DSLR because it fits in his jacket pocket. And you can take like a nice picture. You can take a nice portrait of somebody in a bar and it doesn't look like a grainy cell phone cam. So the benefit of using those is that the sensors are a lot bigger and the glass is a lot bigger. So more glass is more light. Bigger sensor is less noise.
Sure.
But for the most part, they're like they went from being a super mainstream thing to a real niche.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The everybody camera has kind of gone away because that's just the phone now.
I carried a DS with me almost all the time in like the late noughts.
If you were into portable gaming at that time, I guess the DS was still the only thing.
Well, like the thing that was it's funny. Most of the stuff I played I played a lot of DS games, but I also played a ton of the old GBA games.
Okay.
Because they had re-released a bunch of SNES stuff.
Yes. On the DS.
On the DS and on GBA.
Back before they took the GBA out of the DS.
Yeah. So you could just jam your GBA Link to the Past card in and play some Link to the Past.
Yes.
And I did that because I rode the bus back then a lot.
Yes, so did I. Like that whole litany of DSs that they put out. Well, I mean that's getting way back.
2 or 3, right?
I was gonna say the first DS is like 04, so that's
wow, really?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
like if we're kind of constraining ourselves to end of decade, then the DS was kind of in its twilight
dying
at that
gasps.
Point. Totally, because the 3DS came out in 2011. So we were talking like DSi at that point, which was I think the first one they sold downloadable games on, if I'm not mistaken.
That was the first place Nintendo sold any downloadable games, wasn't it?
I think that's right.
Or did they have the Wii Shop before that? They had the Wii Shop.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of handhelds, in terms of DSs, that was the first DS I think that you could download.
They weren't really
onto.
games.
Well, they were called DSiWare. They were little. super dumb.
Was that the notebooks and all that stuff?
I started to say super dinky, but that's not fair. I mean, they were very bite-sized games. They were very like $5 kind of.
Is this stuff like Box Boy originated there or something?
No, Box Boy was I think 3DS.
3DS.
It was super limited stuff from what I remember. It was nascent Nintendo dabbling in online stuff, but I mean, whatever. The Switch has like the concept of the Nintendo handheld has certainly stuck around. In the intervening 10 years. It's not like phones came out and obviously everybody was like, well, video games are dead. Everybody's just got a phone now, but that didn't quite prove true.
I mean, the
Nintendo handheld has kind of endured for this whole decade.
That's true. I mean, and prospered in some cases.
Yeah. Well, it was up and down. 3DS was a little iffy for some time.
I mean, look, the 3DS had a soft launch and picked up. It recovered. It didn't recover to the same tune as like the Wii or the DS, but they sold it. It was a successful product.
Absolutely. Eventually, yes.
3 versions, 4 versions.
I just mean that first year or two was old spotty.
Did you carry chargers for stuff back then?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I was gonna say my love affair with retractable cables might have started around the.
Oh yeah.
It was probably a little more like mid.
I remember when you guys got into that at Giant Bomb because I was around whiskey then. It was when we were in the basement.
I'm so sad nobody's ever asked me to do one of those "What's in your bag" videos just because I want to show off my retractable cables.
Oh man, we would have.
The sad part is I started getting into them in Japan, where a $3 USB-A retractable cable would last you, let's say, 15 years because I still have it in my bag.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
But now they're everywhere, and most of the ones you can get from Amazon or Monoprice or whatever are garbage.
Yeah, they're real cheap.
Like the spring loading in them will break after 6 months, and it's like kind of not worth getting them anymore.
The connectors are real wobbly too.
Yeah, like they're all so cheap now. But in the heyday of retractable cables, I mean, if you travel a lot and you need to bring a bunch of different chargers and cables with you, like it's the way to keep the spaghetti out of your bag.
One of the really nice things is the rise of USB charging it's not perfect because I still have to carry a micro lightning
yes,
and some USB-C cables when I carry stuff around now.
Yeah.
But it's better than the old days when you had to have like
5 bulky chargers.
Well, and like some phone specific thing that if you forgot, you'd have to go pay $30 at some extortion place.
Yes, manufacturer specific.
Yeah. That stuff's definitely improved.
Yes, definitely.
And I feel like with C, we're on the path to eventually replace all of the things with C stuff.
Kinda, you think?
Like the new iPads are C, aren't they?
The Pros are. These Pros are C. It seems like they're going to transition to C on the phone at some point. I'm sure. I think a lot of Android phones are going C now, right?
There has been word that they're going to. Android phones have been C for a while. Yeah. Like the Pixel 1 was a C phone, which is now 3 years old.
USB-C, just like every other USB-C, seems like kind of a giant mess, though. There's like 5 different cable standards, and they all do different stuff, and some of them are not very compatible, and you never know what's what.
Well, I was going to say the thing that I have found the hard way is that there's a very limited number of actual USB 3.1, like full Thunderbolt speed.
Right, that's what I mean.
USB-C cables.
Like they all look like a USB-C connector, but you generally don't know what the capabilities are.
Most USB-C cables are just like USB 2 or USB 3.0 cables that are capable of doing high power transfer.
Yeah, which is, I think that's PD, right? USB
PD. It's confusing.
Power delivery, I think.
Power delivery is the PD or something, yeah. This came up because of the Oculus Link.
Okay.
So Oculus Link, Oculus Quest added a few weeks ago support for a link cable, which means you plug a USB-C cable into your headset, plug the other end of your computer, and then Oculus software on your computer sees the Quest as a standalone VR headset. So you can play PC games on the mobile headset.
Video and power over that cable. Right?
Video and power over that cable.
Yeah.
The cables that worked with it at launch were like 3 feet long, which isn't anywhere near long enough. There's an Anker that's 10 feet long, and Oculus is selling a fiber one now that's 15 feet long, I think, which is like the 10-foot long one is probably okay if your PC's in a good spot, but the 15-foot one is pretty good.
Sure. I mean, the problem to me with USB-C is that the connector looks the same no matter what you've got.
Well, that's also the good thing.
Well, but I mean, to me, that implies that every cable will work with everything. I feel like that's going to be the intuitive notion that most people are going to get from looking at that. It's like, if this cable fits everywhere, then it must work everywhere. But the opposite is true, and it's just a giant mess. Like the Raspberry Pi 4 launched with a bug.
Oh, no.
They didn't follow the USB C power spec. It's the first one with C in it. It's a minor bug. It's really not that big of a deal. But if you use certain types of more expensive USB-C cables that can do like audio and certain extra functionality, the Pi will not be able to pull power over them. Like it puts the cable, or it starts requesting like.
Do they provide a cable?
I believe you have to buy a charger separately, but it's like $8. Again, it's not a big deal if you use their official like $8 power adapter. Not a big deal.
Well, so the cable
it's just too goddamn confusing. Like, how did USB make it through this entire decade and not get any better?
I think it got better. It's just
know.
It's like
not better enough.
Think about the level of complexity of the thing you're trying to describe there as. It's a cable that can both, you can copy stuff off of an SD card or a hard drive, and also use as a monitor cable, and also uses the main power delivery for your laptop.
Look, speaking as a trained computer accessory designer and engineer, I'm here to tell you this should be easy as hell.
As an expert. You heard it here first.
No, I know.
Direct your criticism, cable designers, to Brad Shoemaker on Twitter.
Obviously, there's a lot of complexity, but it just feels, the USB is one of those consortium-driven things, right?
Yeah, so the loudest voices make the biggest impact,
and like bad decisions get made over
and over. I think as a whole we're better off. Look, could we have not had USB Mini? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like the A to micro to C has been a pretty smooth physical design transition, and that's kind of the hard part, right?
I guess so.
Like if in 10 years everything's using USB-C, we're probably in a good spot.
I guess that's an improvement.
Yeah,
it's a pretty low bar.
It takes a long time though, because you think about I had to charge. I was playing some PS4 VR games the other day, and I had to find a mini cable to charge my PS Moves, right? Because those things are still minis.
Oh, that's the old ones are. The new ones are
their PS3 era hardware, which was all mini.
Yeah, the ones they sell now are micro.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
well, they should be C. Why are they micro? Anyway.
Yeah.
I carried a Kindle back then.
Did you?
Yeah.
When did the Kindle launch?
2007 is when the first one that was like $500 launched.
Okay, I got into Kindle very late, so you're way ahead of me on that.
Well, so I think the first reasonable price ones started coming out, like they were $200 in 2008, 2009, around holiday time. But then the first reasonable price ones came out this year, where you got into like the Paperwhites that were $60 and stuff like that. And when they added the backlight, it made it really
there were Kindles without backlights.
Oh God!
Oh man!
They didn't have backlights for years.
Did they not learn from the Game Boy Advance?
Well, so it's a reflective screen. It didn't need the backlight. You just had to use like a normal reading light.
Yeah.
But it turns out it's much more pleasant to read in bed with all the lights off, and you don't annoy your spouse as much.
Yeah.
I carried it mainly for battery life though, because like if you think about your iPhone 3GS, your iPhone 4 battery, they didn't have the battery for me to like be on an airplane and be reading for 3 hours and then get off and still be able to use my phone to find out where I was supposed to go. With my smart map or whatever.
Yeah. I find it a lot more pleasant to read on an e-ink screen.
I like it a lot.
Generally. It's just easier on the eyes somehow.
Yeah. It's the next best thing to paper.
Oh.
I also, like, if I was traveling, I would carry a map. Like
Physical map?
Like if I went to New York or something before so I had one E3 where I went to E3, and it was the first time I relied on the smartphone for calendar and stuff. And I dropped it getting out of the car at SFO and smashed the screen on my iPhone. I think I launch iPhone, original iPhone. And I was completely hosed because I had no idea where my meetings were or nothing. So I had to go and get my laptop out. I may not even have had a laptop. I had to call somebody to look at my calendar in the home office and write down where all my appointments were.
Nice.
And as a result of that, I always carried a map because, like,
smart.
Remember, iPhone didn't launch with turn-by-turn directions; it just had a Maps app.
Right.
You didn't get turn-by-turn directions until Google Maps came on the service in like 2011.
Sure.
And Apple Maps launched.
God, it was 2012. It was Maps this decade. Google Maps.
Well, no, Google Maps existed before.
Okay.
But it was very much a don't use this for turn by turn. This is only for knowing how to get someplace.
Sure. By eyeballing.
Use this as a map, not as a GPS.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like Google Maps, especially in an urban environment, is like the most extreme blessing and curse kind of situation.
It's Waze makes that. Waze and Google Maps are both real good.
Like it is enabled navigation that was never possible before, but at the same time, it has Like, I can get around better than I ever could before.
Yeah.
I've also stopped learning my way around more than ever before.
I mean,
does that make sense?
It's funny because
like I just rely on it so much that I stopped like kind of taking note of landmarks in a lot of cases. You know, it's like, oh, I'll just look it up on Google Maps again.
I see. I don't get that. But the thing that I love is that I can go to any city in the world and know how to get around, even if I don't speak the language.
That's what I mean. Like, that's the good side.
Like, that's the beautiful thing.
Totally.
And then the Waze thing, where like all of a sudden like 6 cars will take the same weird left turn and go down a series of windy back streets. So Waze is social maps.
Oh wow. I didn't realize that's how it worked.
Yeah, and like you report traffic obstructions, and they pick up data to. It's where Google Maps gets real time traffic data. So, like the one of the famous ones is you'll get off at Caesar, not at Cesar Chavez, at it doesn't matter. It just winds you up near like Park Presidio and stuff like that, rather than going around what seems like the straight sane way. So social maps in general.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Let's see. You've got headphones on here. I think everything was wired pretty much at the beginning of the decade still. Were there Bluetooth? There were Bluetooth headsets or like earpieces.
Earpieces.
For sure.
I don't think aptX and the high quality Bluetooth audio came on until like 2012 or 2011.
That sounds about right to me.
And the battery life on those, like initially they were just big chonker over-ear headphones because you needed something big to hide the battery.
That's what I remember seeing on the bus for the first couple years of that was the giant. And then you've got battery packs.
Yeah, do you? Yeah, I carry a battery backup with me on most places now.
I've got one that I keep with me all the time.
Oh God, my nose is so itchy. I mean, battery technology in general has improved at a shocking rate in the last decade. We talked about this a few weeks ago, so we don't need to get into it again.
That didn't even exist as a consumer product in 2010, right?
No, they would have been crazy.
The standalone external battery that has USB and other ports on it.
Yeah, I got one of those one year when we went to CES at Tested in like 2011 or 2012, and I made so many friends that year just sitting in line waiting for press conferences because people were like, "Hey, what's that thing? What are you plugged into? Is there a wall plug here?" It's like, no, it's just a battery. And they're like, what? What is this? What devilry is this?
Changes everything.
And it was good for maybe 2 iPhone charges, but you could I just topped off a bunch of people. It's where I met Jeff Grubb, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Should we talk about, like, I feel like now I pay a lot more $10 a month for stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this is maybe a bad thing, I think. I think this is a bad...
I'm of two minds about it, but
I think that's the right response probably. So
it can be a good value.
It all started with Netflix.
Yes.
Right. $7.99 a month to get discs in the mail. Oh, by the way, we're not doing discs anymore. Here's
they still do discs.
I mean,
technically,
do you do discs? Nobody does discs. No. Yeah. And like they boosted that service on the back of the Starz streaming deal. It seems like. Do you remember that Starz?
I remember Starz as a cable channel. I mean, is it not still around?
It's still around, but Netflix licensed all of the Starz content.
Is that how they got
early Netflix streaming service?
Is that how they got into streaming?
That's how they got the massive dump of content that they had at the beginning.
Okay.
And then they kept adding to that.
I remember that actually. Now, thinking back to like 2008 when I signed up for Netflix, I remember how much of the stuff was labeled as Starz on there.
Oh yeah. Well, and then, but I mean, if you think about just streaming video in general, YouTube launched like late 2006, 2007. Vimeo was around. Porn sites had got the video streaming down for a really long time by that point.
That's always the way.
But like, you still didn't stream a ton of video. Like my home broadband was 100 megabit down and 10 megabit up, and I had awesome internet in 2010, 2009.
Mine was probably about the same. Or most video streaming you were doing was to a computer.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. There was no easy way. In 2009, I had a Squeeze Box, which was a Logitech thing that would let you stream music to your stereo in your living room. Remember stereos? We all had those.
Vaguely.
Yeah. So it was a little box with a cold cathode display that would like take your MP3s from a file share on your network and blast them to multiple rooms in the house. It was like a proto Sonos.
Okay.
Or AirPlay sharing or Google Play sharing or whatever.
I'm trying to think what I watched Netflix on when I first signed up for it.
Probably the Xbox.
It was probably
Xbox 360.
You're probably right.
Or PS3.
Yeah. I guess that's right. But like, what if you didn't have a game console? What did you use back then?
They sold a lot of Rokus.
Yeah, but when did those happen, I guess, is what I'm asking. Like, when did Netflix in the living room really become a thing? Was it probably around the beginning of the decade?
No, it was definitely...
Even after the beginning?
Yeah, so if you weren't watching on game consoles, like the Wii had a Netflix app, right?
That's right, sure.
But there weren't a lot of like low power standalone boxes. I remember that D-Link Boxy Box thing.
Okay.
Which was like a kind of Xbox Media Center fork.
Sure.
That was just running on a dedicated piece of hardware.
Like, when did the first Apple TV come out? That was definitely this decade.
Well, the first Apple TV, the white one, the bad one, was 2007 or 8, I think.
But I'm sure, I mean, the point is, like, the rise of services that you can subscribe to on a monthly basis dovetails with the rise of cheap hardware that you can plug into your TV to carry those services, right? Generally.
I mean, I think
that feels like mostly a this decade thing to me.
Oh, that 100%. Yeah, we spent a lot of the early time it tested talking about when over the top was going to matter and reviewing Roku boxes and shit like that.
I don't think I ever heard the term over the top until you brought it in here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's awkward.
Is that a play on over the air? Like, what did the top?
It's over the top of the digital broadband network. So instead of coming over the airways or cable network,
I wasn't sure what the top of what was being referred to.
Yeah, I think the top is...
That's a strange...
It's what all the industry people call it.
Okay. Because there's also set-top box. I don't know if it was top of television or what.
Maybe it is over the top of the
Maybe that's what it was.
Huh.
Let's not dig into the origins of industry jargon here.
But yeah, the first Apple TV... I'm not able to find this because the service is also called Apple TV.
Right. Seems like a real mistake of branding to me.
Look, we're branding experts here. The first...
That's right. I'm in computer engineering and marketing, it turns out.
The first gen white box, the one that looked like a small Mac Mini, was 2007.
I've never seen that before. Is it the one with all the ports on the back?
It has a bunch of... It has like
8 or 9 ports on the back?
It has component ports and S-Video and the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, optical, all that stuff.
That predated HDMI, maybe, when I think about it.
Okay.
Because remember, HDMI barely made it out for like the second rev of the Xbox 360 and the first PS3.
PS3 had it, but it was like the first thing I remember.
Yeah.
So
then the second one was 2010. It's not the one that runs apps. It's the one that
the good Apple TV.
It's not the one that you can install your own apps on. It's the one that's just like the apps that they chose.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Sure.
And then the third gen launched in 2012.
Okay. Okay. So definitely around the beginning of the decade is when Roku's and Apple TVs and all that stuff really started catching on.
Yeah. And if you think about it, there wasn't a ton of content for them at first. Like you couldn't... I remember MLB was one of the first big sports networks that had app presence for both phones and set-top boxes, because those things kind of came around at the same time. Like, I remember being able to watch the MLB 4-camera feed of, like, not the broadcast, but just the shit that was happening on the field with a radio voiceover on the MLB app in, like, I don't know, probably 2012.
Okay.
But that was unusual. And I paid $15 or something to watch that during the World Series.
Right.
Or during the playoffs.
For that one stream, that one game?
For access to all the games during the final part of the season. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like that Netflix was definitely the only one of those services I was paying for at the beginning of this decade. And then for a long time after that.
Well, and a lot of people, I got grandfathered into that just because I had discs.
Sure.
Hulu came on early 2010s.
I think that was probably the first big competitor that I can remember.
Probably. I mean, there was a bunch of other stuff. There was like Vudu and a bunch of other things that like didn't have enough this was all a chicken and egg thing, right? Like, you needed the hardware, you needed the content for people to buy the hardware to put on the set-top boxes so that you could watch the content on the TV where people really wanted to watch it. But you needed the content so that people would buy the hardware to buy. Like, it's amazing that they managed to make this work. And it went from one of those things that, like, everybody was talking about, when is this going to happen? When is this going to impact cable subscriber numbers and all this stuff, to just like everybody's fucking subscribed to everything now.
It's the fact of life now.
There's, I mean, look, you can subscribe to Boomerang, which is Cartoon Network's like old Hanna-Barbera cartoon channel. Basically, it's like old Scooby-Doo and Space Ghost and stuff like that.
And that's a standalone subscription.
That's a $5 a month subscription.
Jeez, man.
Disney Plus,
Apple TV Plus,
Criterion. You can get.
I think Warner Brothers is spinning up a streaming
next
service.
Summer. Yeah, that'll replace HBO Go. I think.
Okay.
Probably at the same price point.
Okay.
But yeah, that'll include all of like the Turner and all of the yeah. It's bananas.
I feel like we're at kind of the nadir of the streaming trend now. Like I get what should we call it? Like the granularization of streaming when everybody is trying to break all their stuff out into their own service now. Like it was great for 6-8 years when you had like what Netflix and Spotify, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that like I added it up before the show just to see where we were at, and even with like Disney Plus, so we get TV over Hulu, like our local TV channels, because we still have TV channels for reasons that aren't worth getting into. And I feel like we're spending 20% less than we were when we had a cable subscription and Netflix.
Still a net gain.
Yeah. So and like the thing that's changed is you kind of turn things on and off. So like when Picard comes back on, I'll turn CBS All Access back on.
So do you do that? That's the other thing that's what I was going to get to as the other downside of streaming. Is that I signed up for Netflix in, let's say, 2008, I think.
Yeah, streaming. Never turned it off.
And I have never unsubscribed.
Wow.
And we go for 3-4 months at a time without watching it at all.
Netflix.
Like how much money have I given them unnecessarily for that span of time? It's a lot.
Well, so I have a kid, so it's a little different because like she'll watch Captain Underpants in its entirety 3 times in
she'll watch whatever
period. Yeah,
whatever they got.
But yeah, like I'll turn off stuff that we're not using.
That's fine if you're proactive enough and attentive enough to do that.
Well,
but if you just tend to forget about it like I do, that kind of turns into an unnecessary money sink.
The trick is I subscribe through iTunes and pay the little bit of a premium, but that also means I can just unsubscribe through iTunes without having to go through their unsubscribe process.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, so if they'll let you, I don't do it for Spotify because I just leave Spotify on all the time because I use it a lot. But everything else gets turned on and off through iTunes.
Huh.
So like Disney Plus, you pay an extra $1 a month or something. You do it through iTunes, and then you can just turn it off through. I mean, realistically, I should change that because I'm not probably going to unsubscribe to Disney Plus given the demographics of my house. But yeah,
we're not. I feel like we're not at the final state of this stuff yet. Like there's going to be a culling, right?
No,
like surely all of these services can't coexist.
Here's what's going to happen. Instead of Comcast and DirecTV and AT&T being the place that combines them all, the companies are just going to absorb each other until it's just Time Warner and Disney left, and that's it.
Great.
And so when you sign up for Time Warner, which will not be $15, it'll be $40.
Yep.
You sign up for Disney, which is not going to be $7, it's going to be $40.
Cool.
And then we're going to pay $80 a month for TV, just like we always have.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right back where we started.
Look, Disney released 7 films that made $1 billion. If you want to talk about bad trends,
oh my God, yes,
homogenization of the media marketplace because Disney was allowed to buy Fox and Marvel and
telecom monopolies.
Yeah, it's probably bad.
It's definitely bad.
So yeah, you have Comcast, NBC, Universal. You have Warner, HBO, Turner, and then you have Disney. ABC, ESPN.
I gave up trying to keep track because it is both too complicated and also infuriating.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is there's only 3 companies now, so it's pretty easy to keep track of.
Well, that's why it's infuriating.
Yeah. I mean, on the other hand, the cost of creating your own content has never been lower.
Sure.
Like, so if you want to spin up an indie Disney competitor, go nuts. Yeah, Bob Iger will eat you.
For breakfast.
You might want to write that one down as a potential top title there.
All right. That one's going to be hard to forget.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see. Where do you want to go next here?
Talk about movies. Digital projection got to be this. Like, remember when you used to look at a movie theater and it would be like, "Hey, this is being shown digitally."
Yeah, and that was a big deal.
And now, like somebody's like, "Hey, we have a 35 millimeter print of Aliens."
I know, and it's insane to think about that. Yeah. That still happens. Even.
I mean.
I remember, I don't know when this was taking place. I think it was like probably I started to say last decade, but it's about to be 2 decades ago.
Oh, wow.
Like probably second half of like 06, 08, maybe somewhere around there, where digital projection was becoming a thing, or like it was in testing, or, it wasn't widespread yet.
Well, it kind of started with Phantom Menace, right?
No, I don't think so.
There were a handful of
that long ago?
Digital projection screens for Phantom Menace.
Man, maybe my timeline is way off.
Yeah.
But I remember like competing standards and solutions. There was like, I cannot remember the name of it. If I had thought of this ahead of time, I would have Googled it, but I remember Roger Ebert was a huge advocate.
DLP stuff?
No, it was still film projection, but it used like I wish I remembered more of the details. It had some kind of really complicated mechanical construction around the projector. Like there was some kind of stabilizing aperture. It was a way to like it stabilized the image. It like made it like very clean and still like digital projection, but still using real film. And he was out there advocating really hard for that because he wanted film to survive, like a lot of people of his age bracket did and still do. I mean, but it didn't make it. Like digital happened. Like it was probably inevitable. So because studios don't want to manufacture and ship film reels for the rest of time.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking it's cheaper to send hard drives. It turns out.
Yeah, that's what. And it allows you to put out point releases for your films after they release.
Look, we got to fix Judi Dench's hand, man. I was thinking about this. I was talking about this the other day because we were talking about dollar theaters, and like. The reason dollar theaters existed originally is they would take the old busted prints from like that had been shown 300 times at the Cineplex,
which would degrade them,
and they'd look shitty because they'd have scratches and tears and all this stuff, and you'd go pay $1 to watch like a dirty, grungy version of the same movie.
Right.
And now it's still all digital, and like the DRM for those movies, like. It phones home to when you run a 20th Century Fox movie, you get like 2 test screens to make sure the shit's working right. Yeah. And then it starts charging the theater every time you press the button to play it. Like it's weird.
Do they even still send hard drives or do they actually just download it now?
Depends on a lot of theaters don't have fast enough internet to download the 4K. I mean, last I heard, but like when we did a private screening of The Martian a few years ago with Chris Hadfield at Tested. And Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, and 20th Century Fox sent us a dude with a briefcase with these encrypted hard drives with a screen on the top of the hard drives, and you put them in the projector, and it was really cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. But 3D, remember 3D was real big in like 2010?
I guess that was probably, that was pretty early.
That was the peak.
When did Avatar come out? 2009?
2009?
Yeah, so 3D was huge at the beginning of this decade. Remember that?
Yeah. Like that was in the early 2010s were when people were doing those post shoot. Like remember for a while, like Avatar he shot with 3D cameras, which is why it looked good.
Right. But there were a lot of post-production conversions still happening.
Yeah, and now almost everything is post-production conversion.
Yeah, because nobody cares anymore.
Nobody gives a shit. Yeah, they just want the money.
Like I'm actually kind of surprised when I hear somebody say, "Oh, I went to see it in 3D these days," because I forget that it's even still projected that way.
I think the last thing I saw in 3D was Spider-Verse, which is
that's not that long ago.
It was fucking good to see in 3D, man.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I've never really enjoyed the brightness trade-off.
Well, so now the projectors are bright enough that the brightness trade-off, like if you go to a cinema display or the IMAX laser at the Metreon, you're not going to notice a difference because those screens are blinding when they're full blast.
Do all TVs even still ship with 3D capabilities?
You know, it's funny. I have a friend who just bought one of those LG OLEDs, and I asked him if it had 3D, and he didn't know.
Yeah, that's kind of where 3D is at these days. I mean, 3D only happened because 4K hasn't happened yet, right? Like they needed a next thing.
Well, no, 3D happened in theaters because they wanted to sell tickets for $5 more.
Well, that's what I mean
for the 3D screening.
Both the film and theater industries and also the television industries needed a thing to because like the HDTV market had become kind of saturated, right? They needed to keep pushing a new tech.
I feel like 1080p TVs were just kind of starting to become ubiquitous around 2010.
Sure,
because like prior to that, it was 720. Like I had a 720p rear projection set or 1080i rear projection set.
Okay.
Before that, and a 720p plasma flat screen, but like I got a 1080. I got the Panasonic that you and I have, in 2012.
Yeah, that's when mine's from. Maybe it's more accurate to say that 3D went away because 4K happened.
I think 3D went away because nobody used it at home.
Well, that's what I mean. Like a superior tech, or more interesting.
I just think people don't care.
Yeah. More universally kind of relevant tech came along.
The bummer is now I have like 4 or 5 displays that can show 3D really well in my house. And it turns out there's no way to get 3D Blu-rays onto VR headsets.
Huh. That's strange.
Or I mean, okay, I'm sure there's a way, but ripping those discs is challenging. Yeah. And also I don't think I care that much.
Yeah. Blu-ray playback is really tough on a PC unless you're willing to spend money on player software.
It's just the easiest thing to do is to use Handbrake and make MKV and just
but then you can't use the menus and it's hard to figure out what's what.
Well, you don't.
Sometimes I just want to throw the disc in the PC and like watch the making of something and then.
Well, look, what you need is you hook the PS4 up to the PC's capture card and then you just watch it through the capture card. It's much easier.
Yeah.
Or realistically, you just load up Disney Plus because it's probably on there because they own almost anything anyway.
Yeah, great.
But yeah, ripping discs did get easy. Like in 2010, ripping Blu-ray, I feel like we did our first Blu-ray ripping guide at Maximum PC in like 2008. And by 2013 or 2014, it was super straightforward and really easy and fast.
It's always seemed like such a nebulous legal area for me, though, because it involves decrypting the discs. I mean, that was true of DVDs and Blu-rays.
Yeah.
And you had to wait for somebody to do that work.
Yeah, you had to wait for some leak to happen that involved what was probably a criminal release of information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, so like, I mean, going back to playing Blu-rays on a PC, like VLC is supposedly able to do it.
You only on Mac because you have to put in
because you need like a key file,
or you put in a library that does the decryption for
That's what I mean. I think there's like, and if I'm not mistaken, that library grows as more discs come out.
I think that's probably right.
Like you have to they keep updating like the definitions for new discs that hit the market.
Well, and presumably Blu-ray was, if you want to talk about things that are bad, presumably Blu-ray is the first one that they were able to sunset old players that their encryption didn't keep up with or that had bad encryption.
Huh.
So presumably you could have bought a Blu-ray player that no longer works.
Wow.
I don't think they ever actually did it.
Okay.
Except for some software players like the CyberLink player that was the one that was the initial release of the Blu-ray keys. But yeah, bad news.
Yeah.
The point is now though, you kind of don't need to do that because you can just pay $40 a month to Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and Disney and HBO Max and get everything you need.
But Blu-rays are so much imperceptibly higher quality.
When you scale the Blu-rays up to 4K, they look a lot better than the streams stuff.
Yeah, that I could definitely see.
Should we talk about? I think we skipped over displays and
we did that screens episode recently. Covered a lot of that stuff.
YouTube was an interesting. Like in 2010, YouTube still had the 10-minute cap.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
that's hard to remember.
Yeah. Because when we started tested, our videos had to be less than 15 minutes long if we wanted to put them on YouTube.
Man, that's wild.
Yeah, they extended it to 10 and then 15 almost immediately, and then like months after that, they were just like, okay, if you're in the creator plan and you haven't gotten a bunch of strikes and shit, go nuts, just post whatever you want. But that was also around the time they launched Content ID, which I think is the biggest scourge on online content creators.
It seems that way.
It's a squelch. It has a real squelching effect.
Yeah, I could see that.
Content ID is how YouTube identifies copyrighted content, and famously, like if it identifies something you post as copyrighted content, it gives all the revenue from that point on to the copyright holder, presumed copyright holder. But the thing is, they don't really police the copyright holders at all. There's no way to get that money back if you were in the right. And the content copyright holder was in the wrong.
I didn't know that.
No, it's just gone.
Wow.
And like it tested, there was some TV station in the Philippines that subscribed to the same royalty-free music library that we did. So they would post their news clips with the royalty-free background track on, and they claimed the royalty-free background track. So they would claim all of our fucking videos.
Wow.
For like a 2-week period until we got it's bad. Content ID is garbage.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So anyway,
I knew it was open to abuse, but I didn't know it was that egregious. That's really something.
And it took me a year to get those people kicked off so they couldn't claim shit anymore. So it was like every week we would lose 3 days worth of video traffic on a large portion of video. Anyway,
they have a problem of scale.
Yeah. Content ID sucks. YouTube is a mess.
Yeah.
Also fascism.
Yes, there's also that. Yeah, we were talking about streaming a little bit before this, making this list. Like, I can't remember what we streamed on before Twitch came around. Like, I guess we probably used Justin TV at some point.
I think you were on Ustream for a little bit, too.
Ustream is the only other one I can even remember from that period. I think we might have been on both variously.
You were on Justin TV for those, like, for the basement,
the very early
TNTs,
TNTs and stuff. It was probably Justin.
Yeah, that was Justin.
If I had to guess. You remember the backpack stunt?
No.
When who was Justin? I forget.
Justin was
one of the founders.
He was one of the founders.
He
built his co-founder built a backpack.
Right, and they went to some trade show when he walked around some trade show wearing a backpack full of like a laptop and streaming.
Oh yeah, and he talked to Tom Merritt at CNN, CNET,
right? And had like I guess a camera on his head or something like that.
It was pinned to his baseball cap.
It was just a big publicity stunt of him like live streaming some entire trade show.
But then he had to keep doing it. Then he did it for 24/7 for like a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh God, that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it was like everything. It was Ed TV,
and that's basically how they launched Justin TV, which is an insane name for a product.
Yeah,
kind of.
Well, and then in 2011 they forked out all of the game stuff because that was starting to take off then.
Right,
the streaming games. I think after you guys invented the Let's Play.
I don't think we quite.
I looked. I did some research. I think you guys.
No. I mean, like chronologically, there were like the Let's Play existed before us. I think we were probably the first like commercial.
Oh, really? I was never able to find anybody doing a complete playthrough.
No, like Let's Plays came from Something Awful.
Oh, really?
Originally, yeah, like I think Slow Beef is credited as the originator of the form.
Good to know,
if I'm not mistaken. But I think we were probably the first like commercial site in the games press category, like doing the straight talk over games. I might be wrong, but whatever. I mean, we did that live at GameSpot.
Nobody watched GameSpot though.
Oh man, come on. on the spot, we did people sitting there playing games and talking.
But those were like 5-minute segments.
It was more interview formatty kind of stuff. Not quite the same thing, but everything has a predecessor.
That's true. One thing begat the next, the next.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
But yeah, so Twitch forked off in 2011. Justin TV got shut down in 2014. And at the time, in order to stream a console game, you needed like a pretty substantial capture setup because H.264 encoding in hardware didn't really exist outside of commercial broadcast gear then.
Yeah.
So you were looking at a pretty expensive box. And now like you can just stream, it's all built into the CPUs and GPUs. So you can stream straight from the console.
Is that what that Aja box that we had did? Was that an encoder, a hardware encoder?
Was that the one that had the hard drives in it?
No, it looked like a piece of futuristic military gear.
It was like
had
a handle box and it had a little thing that slid out of the top.
It was like a brushed metal silverish color. It had a big handle on the top.
That's an up-down-cross, I bet. So that changes like 59.97 or 29.999 whatever to 30 frames per second. So you don't have to do any. It does the pull down. The 3.2 pull down.
The point is, there used to be a lot of expensive arcane hardware that no longer is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of money we spent on hardware, the hardware that we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on launching Whiskey in 2010 in the basement with the real production studio, now is like a PC with like three $200 capture cards and OBS, and some cameras and shit.
It's the democratization of everything.
I mean, look, we talked about the podcast setup that we use here, I think before, but this would have been at least a couple of $1,000s, and it was maybe $800, $1,000.
You could our entire podcast setup minus the headsets that we're talking into. You could cram into your pockets.
Yeah, I fit this in my jacket pocket.
The little mixer and the little recorder. You could just we could just do that.
We could battery up.
Yeah.
We could put the headphones on and just walk around, do an outside walking around the world podcast sometime.
It is marvelously portable. Do you want to talk about PCs?
Sure.
A little bit?
The personal computer. It's dead.
Speaking of PCs. Is it?
Nobody uses them anymore.
I still love it.
Pickup trucks.
I still love it.
I like my PC.
I will never not want to build a new PC.
I thought about buying one.
Wow. You've crossed over.
Look, when it goes well,
I thought I knew you.
It's great.
Has it? I don't want to blow my horn here, but I haven't had a lot of experiences with it not going well.
I'm always like this last transition from like SATA to NVMe and M2 PCI Express cards and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's a little dark magic that happens in there.
Sure. I mean, the thing I don't think I've ever had is the get all excited, spend the money, get all the boxes in, set aside time to build.
Yeah.
Hit power button, fail to post. Like that's the thing I don't think. Like if I had one of those, I think that might be enough for me to question the process because that's so heartbreaking after all that effort.
So I helped Gary build his new computer a few months ago.
Yeah.
And everything was working. I left. He came back and he's like, it's turning on. It's staying on for like 3 seconds, then it turns right back off.
That kind of stuff. Like some kind of ground issue or...
Do you know what it was?
What was it?
Fucking power button in his case was bad. So the power button was sticking and staying stuck on.
Yeah.
And it was just turning on. And then as soon as it had been pressed down for 3 seconds, it would turn back off again.
That's unfortunate.
So like that kind of stuff really eats at you. And
sure.
Like in the old days, I didn't realize it, but like working at Max PC and then it tested, I had a safety net because like I had not infinite hardware, but like if something broke, I could just go to the work the next day, grab a spare power supply, take it home, and swap stuff out to figure out what was broken.
Yes.
And then had a loaner for long enough to get the new one in, the old one replaced. And doing it without that safety net, it's terrifying.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah,
for sure. Have I ever told you about the time I hot swapped my BIOS? You ever had to do that?
Jesus Christ, Brad!
It was rough.
Did you pull the chip?
Yeah, while it was on,
like a CMOS one, a big long with the prongs on the side.
Yes, that type of BIOS.
Why the fuck did you do that? That's a terrible idea.
I tried to flash some kind of hacked BIOS. This was in the heyday of overclocking.
Also a terrible idea.
This was right around 2000, 2001.
God damn it.
It probably, I can't remember why, but I think it exposed maybe extra voltage features or something like that.
Brad.
Like it was just to get that extra 50 megahertz.
Brad.
Brad. I can't remember what happened, but the flash went bad.
Oh, can't imagine.
And the PC wouldn't boot. But God, I'm trying to remember how this worked now because it's been 20 years. My roommate was out of town on a business trip. He just happened to have the exact same motherboard as me.
Oh, God.
So now I remember what I did. I booted his PC, waited for it to fully boot.
Oh, no.
If I'm trying to remember how this went, I think I pulled it I pulled his BIOS out.
Did you have an EEPROM puller?
I can't remember how I did it.
You didn't just use your fingers.
The process, maybe. I don't know. The process generally was boot a PC with a good BIOS in it.
I'm shaking my head.
Put the bad BIOS in after it's booted. Flash that BIOS good. And then turn it off. And it worked. It totally worked. I totally was able to flash a good BIOS back onto the chip and put it back in my... And both machines were fine forever after.
Wow.
That's the shit that I love about building PCs.
I mean, look. I love doing like a fancy wire job.
Yeah.
I love doing the whole thing.
Did you? I don't want to interrupt or digress, but did you see the new Mac Pro has no cables?
It's all just like
zero cables,
hardwired into the board.
It's all contact.
That seems like it's worth $30,000.
Yeah, I mean it's like everything is engineered to spec to have everything connect
on the slots. That's why it's so fucking expensive.
Shoving everything into its place and having it all just touch itself.
Tim Apple did a great job with that one.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, I think the big thing for me on this decade is the rise of the SSD.
Okay.
Like, if you think about it, this might have to be a two-parter at the rate we're going. If you think about it, like, there's not been anything that has done as much for your day-to-day, like your computer just feeling like a phone. Like that was the big, like if you think about it, in 2010, the phone was instantaneous, even though the processors were slower, they were less capable because everything ran off of flash. Right. Like you launched an app and it opened right up. There was no waiting for the disk to spin back up and to find the sectors on the disk. And like the decreasing cost of SSDs to the point that now you can get like a decent SSD for under $1 a gigabyte.
Yeah.
Under 10 cents a gigabyte, rather. Like $200 for a 2 terabyte SSD is bananas.
This might be the nerdiest thing I've ever said, but if you were to, let's say, rank the most important innovations in PC hardware in history, like
I've done this before. I've done this exercise. We did this in 2008, I think, at Max PC.
Game of the year for hardware.
It was game of the millennium.
Hardware of the
technology.
Forever. Like I would say like the SSD is a contender for maybe number one.
SSD's what? Yeah, I mean, I like we put USB at the top of the list.
Like the only knock against SSD is that it just makes an existing tech faster.
Yeah,
it doesn't enable new functionality really.
Arguably, it's more reliable, maybe depending on some specifics. I think SSD
the move to SSD was at least like top 3 biggest upgrades in the history of PC building.
Yeah, like we got my mom a new laptop for Christmas that I helped her set up at Thanksgiving when I was there, and she was like, "This is incredibly fast." It's like, yeah, it has an SSD, Mom. You haven't had a computer that had an SSD before, and she's like, everything just opens right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's USB, graphics accelerators, and SSDs. Those are the 3.
Yeah, that seems right.
That have made PCs good.
Yeah.
In this day and age.
I think that's a good list. I think that yeah. The other thing that's happened is power consumption. People started paying attention to power consumption because of the rise of mobile in the last decade.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with an NVIDIA executive who shall remain nameless in like 2007 or 2008, post the GeForce 5800, but pre Tesla microarchitecture, which was like the first GTX cards, right?
Okay. So they were at a real low point.
They were at a point, and he literally was like, "Look, they were talking about they asked me. He started out by asking me how I would feel if I had to plug a power brick into the video card.
Yeah.
This was post Voodoo 56000.
Okay, which never shipped. Right?
Never shipped.
That never actually made it.
That was
market.
The only thing I ever saw that actually we got one of those at Maximum PC, and it had a fucking huge chonker of a power brick.
Yeah.
But he was like, "How would you
plug into the wall?"
To
be clear,
yes.
This is a video card that plugs straight into a wall outlet.
Yeah, but it was still internal.
Yeah,
like you put in a slot and then plugged in a dongle into the. But anyway, so he asked. He was like, "What? How would you feel if we did the power brick thing?" I was like, "Oh, like the Voodoo 56000." He was like, "Yeah, like the Voodoo 56000." I was like, "I thought that was fucking stupid."
Yeah. Was this before graphics cards needed to plug straight into the power supply?
This is when that was starting.
Okay.
So that started with the 5800, I think, was when you needed a separate plug, a power plug.
I feel like I remember even
supply.
that being kind of scandalous, and now it's just accepted. Now it's every card.
Well, I mean, look, if you go back, my Pentium 60 didn't have a CPU heatsink.
Oh yeah, no,
it was just a bare CPU
little ceramic package in there.
It didn't even have mine didn't even have that. Mine was just the naked ass CPU.
Yeah.
The point is, he was like, "Well, here's our concern. We are concerned with the power capacity of an average home electrical circuit, which is in the US 120 volts, 15 amps, like 1600 watts coming out of the wall." And he was like, "We think that in a few years, if things keep going at the rate they're going, your gaming PC is going to absorb every amount, all the electricity that the circuit breaker in the breaker box can provide to your outlet." And I was like, that seems bad. And then mobile stuff took off, and they started paying attention to like performance per watt.
So was reduction in process size not a thing before mobile?
So
was that not a target for development?
They would reduce process size, but then they would just use the extra TDP to do more math.
Right back up again.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also they didn't do things like there's really basic stuff that they started doing in the back half of the last decade, or the first half of the last decade, I guess, that was like turning off parts of the CPU that aren't used, right? Like, and of the chips that aren't used. So prior to that, your CPU would just be running full bore the entire time, and like having variable clock speeds for different parts of the chips and stuff like that would let them maximize efficiency without losing any capability at all.
Right.
I'm glad we didn't get to that dark future where we needed to get like a 240 volt outlet for our fucking PCs.
That would have been real bad.
We have a list here. Internet's gotten better both on the phones and the house. We don't really need to talk about that, but
everybody knows internet's fast.
Yeah,
it's great.
Fiber's great. You should get fiber.
It theoretically is great when you don't have to pay by the byte.
Yeah,
that's business practices around
4G seems pretty good.
Yeah, business practices around the internet are terrible in a lot of cases, but the actual technology gets better and better.
Yeah. Here's some stuff that didn't exist in 2010.
Okay.
Virtual reality.
Well, in its current form, sure.
In a usable form by humans.
There were previous attempts, let's say.
Look, I've never played, what was the name of the game with the dinosaurs? I never played it. So I don't know if it was good. It looked bad.
Yeah.
The thing with the back, with the CRT on the front, and then the 15-pound weight on the back to counterbalance it.
Bad for your neck.
Yeah.
The current good iteration of VR.
It's worth mentioning a lot of the stuff that's on this list spun off directly from the rise of cheap either processing or cheap like ICs in terms of like accelerometers and gyroscopes. Because without accelerators and gyroscopes that cost nothing, VR headsets wouldn't exist. Without infrared, anyway.
Yeah.
3D printers. They were toys. They existed prior to 2010, but not really. Like the first MakerBot came out in 2008, I think.
Not for consumers, right?
Kind of for consumers, but the ones that were like the first consumer printers in the early 2010s were toys. They were for learning about 3D printing, not for 3D printing.
Or anybody that had a real one, it was for like industrial use and rapid prototyping and stuff like that, right?
And they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
But now you can buy for like if you spend $3,000 on a 3D printer, you get something that is a fucking amazing 3D printer.
I see people post photos of things that I can't tell are 3D printed anymore.
Yes.
But part of this is that we don't work with you and see all your cool stuff from tested firsthand anymore.
Yeah.
But in my mind, stuff that's 3D printed still has that spaghetti look where it's like strings of weird cheap plastic.
Well, so
and, like I see people post things now that like oh, that looks like a ceramic figurine, or it looks like it's made out of a much nicer material than it actually is.
Well, so that
stuff has really advanced.
The fused deposition printers, like the ones that we used to use at Tested with the spaghetti, pooping out the cheap plastic, those still exist, and the difference is the resolution's gone up, so they're like a tenth of a micron in some cases on vertical slices.
Maybe that's what it is.
So you can't see the lines as much. The other thing is that other technologies like lithography printers and other types of printers have come online that don't have those lines.
Okay.
So they just look like a kind of fuzzy, like a slightly knurled surface and look really good. And also people are doing things around 3D printing. So they'll like use a 3D printer to make something either that they're going to like, I think SpaceX rocket engines parts are 3D printed.
What?
You can 3D print titanium now.
Wow.
Adam printed a bulletproof Iron Man suit for an episode of Savage Builds this year.
Did he test it?
Flew. Yeah.
Did he test the bulletproofness?
He wasn't wearing it when they shot it, but they put a ballistics dummy in there and shot it, and it was bulletproof.
Okay. That's wild.
And then they made it fly because it had jetpack. That's not real, but there's a guy that has jetpacks that work.
Sure. You've got home laser cutters on here, which I feel like is very much in that wheelhouse of like consumer maker type stuff.
Yeah, like those.
Like you had 8, 10. I guess they had this 10 years ago. You could go rent time at a CNC shop. Yeah, probably, and you get access to a laser cutter. But hearing that people had them in their home was like terrifying to me. I was like, what? Well, you can't buy lasers.
I feel like in the like early 2000s, Boing Boing ran a story about the people at NYC Resistor, which was a makerspace that like MakerBot and a lot of businesses spun out of. And they wanted to get a laser cutter, but it cost $25,000, and they had to figure out a business case, like so that they could figure out how to raise the money to pay for it. And they were like, look, if we charge $50 an hour for people who are part of the makerspace, then we can have all the laser cutters we want. And now you can buy a laser cutter for like $2-3. You can buy a cheap Chinese laser cutter that'll last like not super long, but will cut things for like $500, $1,000. Huh. You can buy a nice one for $2,000. Like it's a market. It's a thing you can do.
Yeah, that's wild.
Hey, here's a fun trivia fact.
Yeah.
You know what the most popular piece of computer numerical controlled manufacturing is?
What?
CNC, home CNC.
Yeah.
Do you know what the most popular home CNC device is?
What?
The Cricut.
What?
Do you know what a Cricut is?
I do not.
It's a vinyl cutter. So you can buy them at like Michael's and Joann's and Hobby Lobby and craft shops. And it's literally like a plotter that cuts vinyl and stickers and paper and stuff like that. People use them for crafting.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, they've been around for years. They're really good.
I did not know.
Yeah. Drones? You like drones? Really? They're fun.
Conceptually, yeah. It's another one of those things. It's kind of a double-edged thing.
Have you ever been drone racing?
No.
Oh man,
that sounds fun.
We gotta we'll have to hook up with the people who go drone racing in like the industrial wastelands in South San Francisco.
That sounds cool.
And you get out there, it's like a RoboCop set.
Yeah.
And then they're flying these 250 millimeter drones that are like the size of a book, like a hardback book.
Okay.
And they're flying them through pipes and stuff.
Wow. Okay, that sounds cool.
And you wear the first person goggles, so everybody's wearing a first person.
Yeah.
And then like it's all analog, so you just tune into the pilot you want's frequency.
Oh wow!
And you can watch their perspective as they're flying.
Huh?
It's very cool.
That's cool. Obviously, drones have enabled a lot of cool like filmmaking techniques and stuff like that.
Nice.
Like they have a lot of cool applications. But
I want the Mad Max stuff.
They seem like they also have a lot of potential for abuse.
Look, everything on this list has potential for abuse.
I guess that's kind of technology, right?
Except for self-driving cars.
Oh, that's definitely.
Oh yeah,
is all upside.
Yeah, we talked about that already. But,
yes,
but self-driving cars, voice recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when Dragon Naturally Speaking? What was the first video game you played that you had to yell at the TV to get it to do stuff?
Oh man, or like plug your cheapo Creative Labs microphone into your Sound Blaster.
I was thinking about like I feel like there was a series of Xbox 360 games.
Sure.
Like didn't you talk to a Splinter Cell maybe?
That sounds right. there was a microphone for the Xbox.
Or was that Ghost Recon maybe?
That might be right.
You had to give voice commands and it never worked.
That might be right. But yeah, it was a trifle. Mm-hmm. It was a distraction. Nobody actually wanted it, right? Like when did Siri come along?
iPhone 4S in 2011.
Okay, so that's very much of this decade.
Yeah, it was released during the first Oktobercast.
Okay.
Siri, Alexa, OK Google, all of that stuff came online this decade.
Yeah.
And some of them are still terrible. Even Siri's got, you can use Siri with Spotify now.
Huh.
Yeah. You say, hey, Siri, open Spotify and play
so-and-so.
I don't know.
I feel like I would add to voice recognition, voice synthesis. Not that it didn't exist. I mean, Dr. Spatzo was around.
He sounded like a robot
25 years ago. Yeah. But so is all the speech coming out of those to present day digital assistants, is it all synthesized?
Yeah.
They're not using any VO. They're not like deforming any VO or anything like that. It's purely machine
They
talking?
record phonemes and build a model based on people's voices or generate one.
Okay. So it's gotten very good.
Tatum's company does that now. Like they have demos where there's a web page that you can go to and you can make Tatum say anything you want because his is one of the demo voices.
So you can train it to use your voice.
Yeah, Shelby's in there too.
Yikes! That sounds dangerous.
It is dangerous.
Yeah.
But the point is,
like, that feels like one of those things that's just going to further ruin the political process in the very near future.
Oh, look, the video stuff is way worse. But you can, with just a few minutes of footage of recording, you can train somebody's voice.
Wow.
Like if somebody wanted to make models of our voices, given the number of hours of podcast recordings there are of us, they could do that very easily.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Real-time ray tracing, that's a thing now.
Yeah, we just talked about
that a few weeks ago. Machine learning. Look, there's a thing that the reason I signed up for Google Photos and started storing my photos there instead of backing them up locally and like having a hard drive that I kept offsite is that I can type dog into Google Photos and it pulls up all the pictures of dogs in those photos. And that's because we've been training Google's machine learning photo recognition algorithms with CAPTCHAs for the last 15 years now. So
wait, do they really harvest that data for that purpose?
Yeah, what the fuck do you think that's for?
Oh, I thought it was just to keep crawlers and.
Oh, well, that's the stated reason. But the real reason is
that's what I mean. I didn't realize that they were using it for two things.
The reason that's a free service is that it lets them. They know now where all the traffic, what traffic lights look like from every single. Mine are always traffic lights and crosswalks. That's all I get these days.
Yeah, cars occasionally,
buses,
hills sometimes.
Oh, you get hills? I've never had hills. I had playgrounds. I had like swing sets one time.
Okay.
But yeah, they use that stuff to collect to train the machine vision algorithms.
That's efficient. I'll give them that.
Private space flight. We don't need to get into that, but yeah, that's a thing that didn't. That happened when this Burt Rotan's team won the X Prize. And video calls. We talked about FaceTime.
FaceTime.
Yeah. I mean, you could video call on Skype before that, but for whatever reason, holding the phone up in front of you makes it much easier.
Yeah, indeed it does. There's probably a lot of stuff we left out off this list, but
yeah, feel free to send us emails at techpod@content.town.
Yeah, but it really feels like the world today is extremely different than it was 10 years ago compared to, like I said, the 10-year span before that, just sort of feeling like a slightly faster version of the same life you had already been living. I mean,
in the 10 years before that, like the big things were that you could buy things online that you couldn't buy on, like commerce on the internet became a thing in that 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. Cause
I've gone back and looked at my Amazon purchase history, and the first stuff I ever bought was college textbooks.
For me, it was like books and DVDs.
Like right around the turn of the century, right around 2000, it was just like college textbooks for the first couple of years. And then at some point, it just became everything.
Well, I remember in the early 2000s, everybody was stealing music like crazy.
Sure.
And I remember signing up for listen.com, which was like one of the first streaming services made by Reel or bought by Reel. And I used that for a little bit, but they didn't really have the music I wanted. And then the RIAA people got scared enough that they let Apple and Amazon and all these other places sell all their music. And then like DRM went away, but still you couldn't buy movies. Like if you think about it, you couldn't buy digital movies until really the Apple TV launched. It was a weird. You're right. It was very incremental. Like the PCs were faster and more capable. You went from like Windows 95 era, 98 era OSs to Windows NT based stuff, and all that. But the phone, you could see the hint of it with phones,
right?
But
you're totally right. It's not to say that nothing happened the previous decade, but the how can I put it? Like I feel like the untethering of technology has been the big story this decade, right? Like,
yeah,
everything is connected and yet not touching anymore.
Well, I remember one of the last keynotes that Bill Gates did at CES. He talked about the 3 screens. They wanted 3 screens, and I feel like the 3 screens were the living room, the phone, and the PC. And it seemed a little crazy at the time because at that point, like, phones were dumb, and the living room was mostly dumb, and the Xbox One, the OG Xbox One, the first Xbox, was not a smart device per se. Like, I think you could buy games on it toward the end of its life, but like, it was mostly a thing you put discs into and games played.
Yeah.
And over the next 10 years, that plan came, like the 360 and then the Xbox One and the phones, the rise of the phones and all that, it eventually happened.
Yeah. So, I remember hearing that pitch from them.
Yeah.
And thinking, wow, that sounds far-fetched.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll happen. I don't know, but here we are.
I mean, look, I paused a movie I was watching last night in the living room, walked back to the bedroom. I'm pretty sure that was an AT&T ad in the 90s.
Yeah, right.
That was like, here's some future shit that you're going to be able to do.
That's a good example of what I'm talking about. Yeah. Just the insanely thorough connectedness of everything now.
Well, and then really it doesn't all have to be corporate. Like, I watched a lot of stuff on Plex, which is my own collection. Mm-hmm. It's neat. Yeah. It's the future.
Yeah. And, we've talked about stuff like using like homebrew things like Homebridge to make a bunch of home automation devices that shouldn't work together.
Yeah.
That stuff's fun. Taking the control back from the corporations.
Digital glue.
Yes.
I guess that'll do it for us this decade.
Yeah. That was
thorough.
Yeah, that was thorough. Also, I was going to say this has been a hell of a span in human history.
It has been a lot of 10 years.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, the last 3 feel like they're about 100.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Sure.
Or gray hair.
Well, let's reconvene a year from now and discuss the next 100 years of history.
Yeah, and in a decade, it'll be another 1,000. So if we make it that far,
time will lose all meaning.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Will. We'll see you guys next week. Yeah. Hey, we're doing questions next week. We'll probably record this before you hear this.
Yes.
And by probably I mean 100%.
Yeah.
But you can send your next set of questions into techpod@content.town. We're doing a question episode basically every month.
Yeah, we've been getting some good ones.
Yeah.
Some interesting
real
stuff.
bangers.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Cool.
We'll see y'all next week.